Welcome back to the deep dive. You sent us a fascinating stack of sources on a really spectacular vision, the Telangana Rising Global Summit. And we're here to, well, give you the shortcut to what's really going on.
Today we are jumping into the plans for the proposed Bharat Future City. Now, this is being sold as India's next big urban hub, maybe its fourth major one.
And the really big hook is that it's supposed to be its first net zero greenfield smart city.
Exactly. The narrative is huge. I mean, they're positioning it as this planned escape from what they call the peak pollution and just the impossible congestion you see in places like Delhi.
It's an amazing premise, right? A clean slate, sustainability first.
hmm
But our mission today is to unpack that grand story and set it against a reality check from these sources.
hmm
We're going to look at critiques that suggest there's this major tension, a huge gap between the spectacular vision and what the state can actually do in terms of environmental governance.
And maybe even more than that, the really complex economics of who actually controls the wealth in the state.
Right, so the core question, based on what the source material is telling us, is this. Is this Future City project a genuine leap forward into sustainable development?
Or is it, as one of the critiques puts it, a highly choreographed piece of magic art? A grand show that's really just for PR and maybe monetizing land really quickly.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that net zero vision. The official message is crystal clear. Bharat Future City will be a model of environmental responsibility.
Right. Green energy, sustainable development protocols, a huge chunk of land set aside for forest cover, all to hit that net zero target.
It sounds perfect, like the ultimate answer to our 21st century city problems.
It does sound ideal, but the sources we have, they immediately throw up this powerful contradiction. They see a profound disconnect between the high-level promises and what's happening on the ground.
And the argument is basically what?
The core argument is pretty simple. It's that the government seems to lack the long-term comprehensive planning and just the operational muscle you'd need for a truly sustainable city.
So their current actions suggest something else.
It implies a more short-term, opportunistic goal, not a deep structural change.
Let's get specific on that contradiction because this is where the critique gets really sharp.
Please.
While the government is talking up this pristine green future, the state is, at the same time, issuing these critical environmental licenses, CFE and CFO, consent for establishment or operation.
And doing so indiscriminately. To polluting industries.
Right now, around the existing city of Hyderabad.
That's the smoking gun for the critics. I mean, look, CFE and CFO, these are the basic legal tools the state has to regulate pollution.
The main mechanism.
The main one. So by just handing them out, the state is actively permitting more pollution. The sources are alleging that the Telangana Pollution Control Board, the TGPCB, is compromised.
The very agency that's supposed to be the watchdog?
The very one.
Here.
They're reportedly issuing permits for highly polluting, what they call red zone industries in really sensitive areas.
And we're not talking about some remote industrial park, are we?
No. We're talking about agricultural fields, sites dangerously close to water bodies and right up against established residential neighborhoods. All places that are outside the designated industrial zones.
So this failure to enforce the law right now, I mean, it just completely undermines the whole future city goal, doesn't it?
It really does. And it raises a critical question for you listening. Can a state that's, actively showing it doesn't have the will or the control to enforce its existing environmental laws?
Right.
Can it credibly pull off a massive, truly sustainable future city project tomorrow? The critics argue this contradiction is proof.
Proof of what?
Proof that the future city is less about sustainability and much more about spectacle.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here a little bit.
Go for it.
Isn't it possible that they're announcing this future city precisely because they know the current systems are broken? Couldn't this just be a strategic retreat? Abandon the polluted mess and start fresh somewhere else?
That's a fair point, a very fair counter-argument. But the sources push back on that, and they push back hard.
How so?
They claim that if the political will was actually there, the government would start by fixing the immediate crises, the ones already devastating the Hyderabad region.
And the big one they cite is the pollution from the pharma sector.
Exactly. The widespread water and ground pollution. It's a massive problem.
And we all know the pharma industry is a huge, huge economic driver for Telangana.
It is, absolutely. But the critique says the administration is either unwilling or just unable to curb this highly concentrated existing pollution. If the real priority was cleaning up the environment, they'd start there.
So because they're not tackling the current severe crisis, It serves as evidence.
Powerful evidence that they lack the focus, the commitment, and just the comprehensive strategy you would absolutely need for a net zero city.
So the argument boils down to this. The whole summit, the new city, it's all a grandiose spectacle,
Hmm.
selling a green future, while the reality on the ground is all about quick, short-term economic gains, using land as the main asset.
Precisely. And if you zoom out and look at the history, the sources suggest this is just a copy of the old playbook.
The real estate-driven models of past leaders.
You got it. Chandrababu Naidu, YSR, KCR. The priority is always quick land deals. Get the investment in fast, not spend political capital on the hard, long-term work of public and environmental health.
Which makes this pivot to financial control so important. If the environmental side is failing, the sources then ask a much deeper question: who actually controls the money? Who controls the capital that this rapid development generates?
And this is where we get into a really fascinating and very nuanced part of the sources. They talk about NIDHULU.
Which translates roughly to funds.
Right, but we're not just talking about government budgets or GST. This is the big private sector money, the huge amount of business capital flowing through Telangana, and the sources point to a major shift in who controls this private wealth after the state was formed in 2014.
And this is where that recent StateCast survey becomes so critical.
It really is.
The sources highlight this new category that's popped up since 2014 called no caste, and they say a huge disproportionate amount of the state's investment, of its business funds, is held by people in this group.
And that's significant because it can mask identity, or it represents people who just choose not to register their caste. It's a data point that wasn't really there before.
So if you break down who controls the business sector, what do you find?
The findings are pretty striking. The sources say that key parts of the local economy, I mean, the everyday businesses, your Kirana stores.
The small grocery shops.
Yeah, hardware shops, wholesale markets, even the big shopping malls. They're largely not owned by Telangana natives, not even by the families who are at the heart of the statehood movement.
So who is controlling the capital then?
Well, according to these sources, the biggest share is held by people who moved into the state after 2014, or by Andhra settlers who came earlier. The critique really emphasizes that back in 2014, your traditional local Sudra, Dalit, and Adivasi castes, they just had very little business experience or concentrated capital.
There were some exceptions mentioned, though.
A few, yeah. Small segments of the Good community in the liquor business, and some Reddy families who had a foothold in pharma and real estate. But they were the exception.
This brings us right back to that famous slogan from the statehood movement: water, funds, appointments for locals.
The core promise.
And now, 11 years later, it seems like government jobs and water are somewhat regulated, but the control over private funds, this huge flow of business capital, that remains a major unresolved issue.
And this isn't seen as just some organic economic shift. This is where the sources introduce a really critical political argument. They allege this influx of business groups from outside the state is a planned migration.
Orchestrated by external political forces. The sources are very specific. They name the RSS and the BJP.
They do. The allegation is that the strategy is to stop local Sudra, OBC, Dalit, and Adivasi groups from building up their own capital.
To prevent them from rising to the level of, say, investors in Gujarat or Mumbai.
Exactly. The critique frames it as a deliberate plan to keep local groups financially dependent, no matter which local party is in power.
And this concentration of capital with groups who don't have deep local roots, what's the consequence?
Massive economic leakage. And that directly hurts the state's ability to fund its own projects, let alone a massive future city.
Why? What's the mechanism?
The sources say it's because these big businesses, they don't have a strong sense of local ownership. They lack what's called Telangana Naadi.
That local pulse, that sense of belonging and reinvesting in the community.
Right. And without that loyalty, the sources make a really specific and frankly damaging claim about tax avoidance.
They call it zero business.
Zero business.
Yeah.
They claim that even with all the online payments, large businesses are managing to manipulate the sales tax system, to manage officials, and just systematically avoid paying their fair share of GST.
So that surplus wealth, instead of being reinvested locally through taxes, is just gone.
It's spent elsewhere or transferred out of state. It's a huge financial hemorrhage for a state that needs that revenue.
So the grand future city vision is facing a two-pronged threat. It's undermined by the environmental failures, and it's being built on a leaky financial foundation where the wealth generated there isn't staying there.
That's the core of the critique. But, we should be fair, there is some movement toward change.
Right. The sources do mention some immediate government actions.
They do. The formation of the Future City Development Authority, the FCDA, and this is a big one, a plan to relocate 10,000 polluting industries from that really sensitive Outer Ring Road area. These are concrete steps.
So that's tackling the environmental side. What about the financial control problem? Do the sources offer a solution for that?
They do,
Mm.
and it's a long-term one. The argument is that Telangana youth, especially from the BC, SC, and ST communities, need to make a radical shift in their focus.
Away from just seeking government jobs.
Exactly. They need to aggressively get into business, into commerce.
Things like Kirana retail, hardware, paramedical services, agricultural tech.
The core of the economy. And the sources explain how they need to do it, not as individuals, but using cooperative models.
So becoming shareholders, pooling small amounts of money.
Yes, and using government schemes and bank loans to diversify who controls the economy. The big goal is to make business in Telangana a business of all castes. That increases local ownership, and crucially, it boosts local GST collection.
So when you put it all together, what does this mean for that ambitious vision we started with?
Well, this deep dive really shows that the success of the Bharat Future City, it doesn't just depend on grand architectural designs.
Or net zero promises.
No. It depends on fixing two very deep, very unglamorous problems. First, you have to rigorously enforce the environmental laws you already have today. And second, you have to fundamentally restructure who controls the private wealth tomorrow.
The vision of a perfect green escape is being really overshadowed by this reality of failed regulation and these complex politicized economics tied to migration and caste.
It's a perfect illustration of how a spectacular public vision can sometimes mask a very shaky, very compromised foundation.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider based on everything we've looked at today. If the state's real priority, as these sources suggest, is short-term land deals over the hard work of long-term environmental enforcement, how much of the future city's most critical part, that promised green land reserve, the forests you need for net zero, is actually safe?
How much of it is truly protected from just becoming the next frontier for another round of high-stakes real estate development?
A compelling question, and one that definitely requires looking past the spectacle.
And into the fine print of governance.
Thank you for sharing your sources and letting us dive into this. It's an incredibly complex issue, and we encourage you, listening, to explore the ground realities of the grand projects happening in your own areas.